My hands were clenched so tight on the steering wheel that I could feel the grooves of the leather digging into my palms. The rain wasn't just falling. It was hammering the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists, each one breaking apart under the wiper's desperate swipes. I should have pulled over, but the road I was on didn't feel like the kind of place you stop unless you have no choice. It was close to midnight, and I had been driving for hours through stretches of nothing but two-lane blacktop and skeletal trees, no gas stations, no houses. Not even the occasional reflective mailbox to prove people actually lived out here. The GPS had been silent for almost an hour now, just a faint arrow on a cracked screen pointing forward as if the road went on forever. I told myself I was fine, that this was just another late-night drive, and the unease crawling along my skin was nothing but tiredness. But the deeper I went into that unlit tunnel of asphalt, the more my body started to disagree. It felt like the air inside the car was getting heavier. My ears kept popping like I was climbing a mountain. But the elevation never changed. The hum of the tires became a drone, like a sound meant to hypnotize you into forgetting how long you've been moving. That's when I saw him. At first it was just a shadow on the shoulder up ahead, a vague lump standing unnaturally still. My high beams washed over him in one smooth sweep, and suddenly he was there, an actual man. He was tall, rail-thin, wearing clothes that looked soaked to his bones. His head was tilted slightly forward, but I could see his face just enough to notice he wasn't blinking. Every instinct told me to keep going, to grip the wheel tighter, stare straight ahead, and let him disappear in my rearview mirror. But instead, my foot eased off the gas. I couldn't explain it. Something about the way he was standing, it wasn't the stance of someone looking for help. It was like he was waiting. When I passed him, I glanced into the mirror. He was still, standing there, perfectly still. But now his head was turned toward me. I told myself not to think about it, not to give it space in my mind. But the further I drove, the more wrong everything started to feel. The road was bending in ways I didn't remember. The rain sounded more like static than water, and I kept catching glimpses of movement just beyond the tree-lined arc shapes that didn't move like animals. 10 minutes later, my headlights caught another figure on the shoulder. My pulse spiked. It was him again. Same height, same soaked clothes, same stillness. I slowed without meaning to, heart thudding like a warning drum. He didn't step forward, didn't raise a hand, didn't even shiver in the cold rain. But this time I noticed his mouth. It was open, slightly, like he was whispering something to the road itself. I pressed the gas hard, refusing to look back. The tires slipped slightly on the wet pavement, the car fishtailing for a heartbeat before straightening out. My breathing was fast now, my knuckles white against the wheel. 15 minutes later, I saw him a third time. By then, I knew I wasn't imagining it. This road was playing tricks on me, folding in on itself like a loop I couldn't escape. I could feel panic trying to climb up my throat. I thought about turning around, but the idea of passing him going the other way made my stomach churn. The rain grew worse. It was coming down so hard now that I could barely see 5 feet in front of the hood. My wipers screeched under the strain, and every so often, the headlights would flare against something pale in the trees, something shaped like a face, but gone before I could focus on it. When I spotted him the 4th time, he was closer to the road. I swerved slightly, giving him space, even though he wasn't moving toward me. But as I passed, his head turned slowly, so slowly I thought I was imagining it to end this time. I swear his mouth was wider, teeth barely visible in the beam of my headlights. The road felt wrong now. It wasn't just endless. It felt alive. Every bend seemed to pull me deeper into its center, the trees leaning closer as if to listen. I kept thinking about how no other cars had passed me. No signs, no distance markers, just me, the rain, and him. And then the radio came on. I hadn't touched it. The dial was still set to an empty frequency, but through the static, I could hear a faint voice. It was low, drawn out, almost like someone was speaking underwater. I turned the volume down, but the voice stayed exactly the same, like it wasn't coming from the radio at all. A few miles later, I slammed on the brakes. He was standing in the middle of the road. My high beams lit him up completely. His clothes clung to him like a second skin. His hair plastered against his forehead. His mouth hung open wider now. The skin around it stretched too far. I couldn't see his eyes, just deep, empty hollows that seemed to drink in the light. I put the car in reverse and backed up fast, tires squealing in protest. He didn't move, didn't step toward me. But the longer I looked, the more I thought I could see something moving in the darkness where his eyes should have been. When I looked down to shift into drive, he was gone. Slightly, like he was trying to see into me. His face, I couldn't make it out clearly, but it was pale enough to reflect the light. The way he was positioned made me feel like I had driven straight into a trap. I didn't want to stop, but I couldn't bring myself to pass that close to him either. Then he moved, just one slow step forward. My breath caught. His arms hung at his sides, fingers curled loosely, but they looked too long, like they belonged to someone else entirely. I glanced at my rearview mirror, thinking about reversing and finding another way home. The darkness behind me looked thicker than the night in front of me. My stomach knotted. I pressed the gas pedal lightly, deciding to inch forward. The sound of my tires hissing on the wet asphalt was deafening. The man didn't step aside. He just stood there, watching. When my car was less than 10 feet from him, he suddenly turned his head toward the woods on the right side of the road. Not slowly, not naturally. His head snapped to the side, like he'd heard something. Then, without looking at me again, he bolted into the trees. Relief washed over me so fast it made me dizzy, but it was tangled with a deeper unease. People don't move like that, and they don't just stand in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m. unless something's very wrong. I told myself to keep driving, to put as much distance as possible between me and this place. But the next mile felt longer than the last 10. The road narrowed, the trees pressed closer, and the rain thickened until I had to squint just to make out the yellow lines. That's when I saw him again, standing on the side of the road, just ahead, soaked to the skin. Head tilted the same way. I gripped the steering wheel harder, telling myself I was imagining it. The road had been empty for miles. I hadn't passed a single set of headlights in either direction since leaving the last town. And yet, in the mirror, there it was again, a faint glimmer, like light bending through fog. I pressed the gas a little harder. The old sedan groaned, but the speedometer climbed. My stomach turned when I realized the glow in the mirror adjusted too, as if whatever it was had matched my pace perfectly. The night outside felt heavier than darkness should. It pressed against the glass, thick and strange. My headlights seemed weaker than they were an hour ago, their beams swallowed up by the black ahead. Something about the road was wrong. I had been driving for nearly 40 minutes since the last turn, and yet every stretch of asphalt looked the same. Cracked white lines, slanted pine trees at the edge, and a single rusted road sign that appeared twice. The first time, it said, "Cold water to 16 miles." 10 minutes later, I passed the exact same sign again. That was when the glow got closer. It wasn't headlights. It wasn't even light in the way you normally think of it. It had no beam, no source, just a faint radiance hanging low over the road behind me, rippling like it was underwater. I took a deep breath and reached for the radio, desperate for some noise. Static hissed, but underneath it, there was something else, faint, distant. It almost sounded like whispering, too low to make out. Then the car jolted. A loud, metallic bang came from underneath, and the steering wheel lurched in my hands. I swerved but managed to keep control. My heart pounded. The glow behind me was brighter now. I told myself to stop, get out, check the car. But my body refused. Every instinct screamed that if I opened that door, I wouldn't come back. The glow swelled. Shapes began to form within it. Not human shapes exactly, but outlines, stretched and warped, like shadows seen through warped glass. They moved in slow, deliberate motions, as if they were reaching for something. The whispers from the radio got louder. My foot slammed the gas pedal. The road curved, and for the first time, in what felt like hours, I saw something ahead, a small gas station, its flickering sign casting pale yellow across the cracked concrete. Relief flooded me. But it didn't last. It didn't last. The lot was empty. The building was dark. No cars, no lights, no sign of life. The glow stopped at the edge of the lot. It didn't cross into the pool of dying light from the gas station sign. I sat there, engine idling, staring into the darkness. Beyond, the whispers faded from the radio. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of my engine cooling. Then, just as I began to breathe again, the sign above the gas station sputtered, flickered, and went out. The glow began to move forward. The road began to feel unnatural, like it wasn't just taking me somewhere, but deliberately keeping me away from something else. The headlights painted the asphalt in pale gold, but the darkness ahead seemed to swallow it faster now, as if the beam was shortening. My chest was tight. I rolled the window down again, hoping for the cold air to jolt me awake. But what came, and wasn't crisp. It was stale, almost damp, like breathing the air inside a basement. I told myself I just needed a landmark, a gas station, a road sign, anything to prove that this was still a highway with a destination and not some endless loop I had fallen into. My eyes scanned the road ahead, desperate for a flicker of neon or the orange glow of street lamps. Nothing came. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights approaching. My shoulders relaxed slightly. Another car meant I wasn't alone out here. As they drew nearer, something about them seemed off. The lights were too dim for a modern car. More like old halogen bulbs. They passed slowly, close enough for me to see the driver. It was an older man with gray skin, his head turned fully toward me. His eyes locked on mine instead of the road ahead. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to speak but never would. Then he was gone, swallowed by the black behind me. My rearview mirror caught the glow of his taillights for a few seconds, but they didn't fade into the distance the way they should have. They just blinked out, as if the car had vanished. I gripped the wheel tighter. The sound of my tires on the asphalt suddenly felt too loud. I turned on the radio for distraction. Static. I scanned the dial, but every frequency was the same. No music, no voices, beyond the thudding in my ears. The house was silent now, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels crowded, as though every shadow in the room is holding its breath with you. My phone screen glared at me from my hand, its harsh white glow casting just enough light to remind me how black the corners of the living room were. I thought about calling anyone, but the name that came to mind first was my mother, and there was no way I could tell her about this. She'd think I was losing it again. That word again scraped through my skull like glass. It had started so quietly. Just after midnight, I'd been lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard what I thought was the sound of someone walking slowly across my kitchen. The first creak of the floorboards made me freeze, but I told myself it was the pipes or the old wood settling. The second creak came closer. By the third, I was wide awake. I slipped out of bed, moving in the dark, careful not to let the floor betray me. My apartment isn't big, just a narrow hallway, a small kitchen, and a living room that always feels colder than the rest of the place. From the doorway, I could see the faint outline of my fridge against the moonlight spilling through the blinds. The footsteps stopped. I waited, my hand resting against the wall, my breath shallow. My mind was already trying to rationalize that maybe a neighbor upstairs, maybe a noise from outside. But then something broke the stillness, a slow, deliberate sound of someone dragging their fingertips across the wall. It started in the kitchen and was moving toward me. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I could hear it clearly now, the gritty, dry scrape of nails gliding over plaster. I wanted to turn on the light, but I couldn't move. If I flicked the switch, I'd either see nothing and feel stupid, or I'd see something. And then I'd know it was real. The scraping stopped it. The corner where the hallway met the kitchen. I was less than 5 feet away. I don't know why, but I whispered, "Who's there?" For a moment, nothing. Then a voice slow, almost hoarse, but to close said, "You know who I am." My stomach dropped. It wasn't that I recognized the voice. It was worse than that. Something in me, some buried instinct, believed it. I stumbled backward into the living room, my hands searching the wall until it found the light switch. The bulb overhead flickered once before humming to life. No one was there. The corner was empty. The kitchen looked untouched, but my eyes locked onto the wall where the scraping had stopped. There were marks, 5 faint, vertical scratches running just above the baseboard, fresh enough the flakes of white paint clung to the grooves. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the living room, the lights on, my back to the wall, waiting for the sun to come up. And the worst part, the part I can't shake, was that I kept catching myself glancing toward that corner, not because I thought something was there, because I knew it still was. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in bed with my back pressed against the wall, staring at the door, waiting for the light under it to flicker again. Every creak of the building felt amplified. My breathing sounded like it belonged to someone else, ragged and too loud. In the still air. By morning, the exhaustion was so deep I felt drunk. I forced myself through the motions of brushing my teeth and changing clothes. But when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I flinched. My eyes looked wrong, to wide, to alert. The skin beneath them bruised with sleeplessness. I told myself I'd dreamt the whole thing. Sleep deprivation can make you hallucinate. People see shadows moving, hear voices. That's all it was. But when I stepped into the hallway, I froze. There were faint scratches on my door, long, shallow marks near the handle, as if someone had run their nails down the wood, testing how far they could push before making noise. My mouth went dry. I bent closer, hoping they were just scuffs from my key. But no, they were fresh. I could still see tiny curls of wood clinging to the grooves. I skipped breakfast. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to answer questions. I just left the building and walked for hours, looping around streets until the sun started to set. When I came back, I felt stupid. I was letting paranoia control me. I was making a big deal out of nothing. The door scratches. Maybe they'd been there all along, and I'd just never noticed. I ordered takeout and tried to drown myself in TV, but I kept pausing to listen. The building was too quiet. I could hear my upstairs neighbor's footsteps like faint drumbeats and the occasional car outside. But between those noises, nothing. The silence pressed against my skull. At 11:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "Stop leaving your lights on." My throat closed. My eyes darted to the window, where the curtain was drawn tight. I stood, gripping my phone, and slowly pulled the fabric back. The street was empty. I turned my phone over in my hand. The number wasn't saved. No profile picture. I didn't reply. I just shut the curtains again and tried to breathe. I told myself I'd call the police. That I should call the police. But what would I even say? Someone texted me about my lights. That's nothing. That's nothing until it's something. I turned the lights off, sat in the dark, waited. At 11:48 p.m., the message came again. Better. I kept my eyes on the white line ahead, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. But my pulse was hammering in my throat so hard I could hear it. The road seemed to narrow with every passing mile. The darkness beyond the edges pressing in like a living thing. The rain had slowed to a thin mist, but my windshield still glittered with drops that caught the occasional flicker of my headlights. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow cast by a tree, but it moved in perfect sync, with my car's speed always just at the edge of the high beams, no matter how fast I went. I gripped the wheel tighter, my palms damp, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then it shifted. It stepped into the light, Asterisk a figure, tall and thin, wearing something that clung wetly to its body. Its head tilted sharply, like it was studying me. The features were all wrong, mouth wide, eyes set to deep, like someone had tried to carve a face but got the proportions wrong. I blinked, and it was gone. But the road behind me wasn't empty. The faint shape of it was still there. Only now it was walking in the center of the road, following the exact line of my taillights. My hand shot out to the radio, blasting the music to drown out the sound of my own breathing. But somewhere in the noise I thought I heard something else, like the faint tapping of knuckles against glass. Not from the back, from my passenger side window. I remember trying to breathe quietly, but my own breath sounded impossibly loud in that stillness. The air felt thick, like the darkness itself had weight pressing against me. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the living room, each second stretching longer than it should. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, sharply, then stopped as if something had silenced it. I told myself to get up, to turn on every light in the house, but my legs refused to move. My mind kept circling back to that single sound from earlier, the slow, deliberate creak, not random, not the kind you hear when the wood shifts. Someone had been walking. I gripped the edge of my bed and slowly leaned forward, trying to catch any new sound. Then I heard it again, but closer this time, not from the hallway, from inside my room. A faint shift, like weight moving across the carpet. My skin prickled. I didn't dare reach for my phone, because it was charging across the room, right next to where the sound had come from. My eyes strained against the dark, trying to make out shapes, but it was as if the shadows were swallowing everything. That's when I smelled it, a faint, metallic tang, the kind of smell you notice after you've bitten your tongue. It was subtle but wrong, and the fear that had been simmering suddenly spiked into full panic. I knew then I wasn't alone. I woke up in the armchair to the sound of my phone buzzing against the coffee table. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been, and for a few seconds I just sat there, staring at my phone as if I wasn't sure it was mine. When I finally picked it up, the screen showed a text from an unknown number. It was only 2 words. Look out. I froze. The room was dim except for the glow of a single lamp in the corner. But my eyes were drawn immediately to the window. My curtains were closed. I hadn't shut them before falling asleep. My heart started pounding. I told myself it was just a prank, wrong number, maybe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was close. Too close. I stood, slowly, my legs stiff from sleeping in the chair, and reached for the curtain. My hand trembled so much I almost laughed at myself. But I pulled them open anyway. There was nothing outside except the streetlight swaying slightly, and the wind. I let out a shaky breath. That was when my phone buzzed again. I said, look out this time. It wasn't from an unknown number. It was from my own. My grip tightened on the bed sheet as another floorboard groaned just beyond my bedroom door. It was faint, careful, like someone testing the wood with each step. I sat up slowly, forcing my breathing to stay quiet, every nerve, and my body screamed at me to call out, to demand who was there. But some instinct told me not to make a sound. Instead, I listened. The house had its usual nighttime sounds. The hum of the refrigerator far off in the kitchen, the occasional crack of the walls settling, but this was different. This was deliberate. The shadow under my door shifted, and I could swear I saw the faintest interruption and the thin slice of hallway light. Whoever it was, they were standing still now, as if they knew I was awake. My mouth was dry, but I managed to whisper, "Who's there?" No answer. The shadow didn't move, yet the air in the room felt heavier, like all the oxygen had been pulled toward the door. My heart thudded hard against my ribs, so loud I worried they could hear it. Then the doorknob twitched. Not a full turn, just enough to send a cold spike down my spine. I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold wood floor, and reached for the heavy lamp on my nightstand. I held it like a weapon, my eyes locked on the knob. It twisted again. This time, slower dot, and then, without warning, it stopped entirely. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. I almost convinced myself it had been my imagination. When something new happened, a sound I'll never forget. From the other side of the door came a slow, deep breath, as though someone was pressing their face right up against it. I don't remember how long I stood there with my forehead pressed against the cool wood of the motel room door. My breathing was ragged, my ears tuned to the silence outside. There were no footsteps now, no shadows shifting under the faint crack of light beneath the door. Only a stillness so complete it almost felt wrong, like the air was holding its breath with me. When I finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole again, the corridor was empty. But it didn't feel empty. I unlocked the door. My hand hesitated on the handle, and for a second I thought about shoving the dresser against it and staying inside until morning. But my curiosity, or maybe my stupidity, won out. The hallway smelled faintly of rain and something metallic. The carpet was damp near my door, and there were wet footprints leading away. Bare footprints. They trailed toward the corner, where the hallway bent toward the lobby. My room was at the far end, so no one should have been passing through unless they were staying here too. I followed them. Each print was perfect, every toe, every crease in the skin, and they were small, like a woman's or maybe a child's. I turned the corner, my heart hammering, but the trail just stopped. No door nearby, no fire escape, no stairwell. I hurried back to my room, locking the door, and this time shoving the dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed, clutching my phone. I thought about calling the front desk, but what would I even say? There are wet footprints in your hallway. Please send someone up. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke to the faint sound of dripping water. I sat up. The rain outside had stopped, and the room was quiet except for that slow, steady drip. It was coming from the bathroom. I got up, my legs trembling, and pushed the bathroom door open. The sink was dry, the shower was dry, but in the middle of the tiled floor was a single wet footprint, perfectly formed. I froze. The print wasn't mine, and it was facing the bedroom. That's when I heard the sound again, not dripping this time, but the faint, deliberate creak of weight on the floorboards, right behind me. I spun around, but the bathroom door slammed shut before I could see anything. The light went out, and in the blackness, I swear I felt cold, wet fingers brush against my ankle. I bolted for the door, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The closer I got to the hallway, the more it felt like the walls themselves were leaning inward, pressing me toward the center, hurting me to the exit. I yanked the door open and sprinted down the corridor without looking back, the sound of my own ragged breathing bouncing off the walls. The elevator was at the far end, its call button glowing faintly. I slammed my palm against it over and over, but the door stayed closed. My pulse thudded in my ears so loudly that it almost drowned out the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of my room. I didn't wait for the elevator. I lunged for the stairwell, the heavy metal door groaning as I shoved it open. The air inside was staler, heavier, and the dim light made the corners look like they were breathing. My hand gripped the railing so hard my knuckles ached as I descended 2, 3, 4 flights. Halfway down the 5th, I heard the stairwell door above me open. The footsteps returned, measured, steady, always the same distance behind. No rush, no panic, just absolute certainty that they would catch up. I burst into the lobby, nearly knocking over a man at the front desk. His face was pale, eyes darting toward the stairwell door I had just come through. Without saying a word, he reached under the counter and pressed something, an emergency button. Maybe. I didn't stay to find out. The automatic doors slid open and cold air slapped me in the face. I ran into the night, not stopping until I was several blocks away. Only then did I turn back. The hotel's front doors were closed. The building looked perfectly ordinary, but in one of the top floor windows, the light was on in my room, and against the glass, I swear I saw a figure, not moving, just standing there, watching me. I didn't go back, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up certain that I hear slow, deliberate footsteps in my hallway. Always the same distance away, always getting closer, getting closer.